10 drones accomplished something that shouldn't have been conceivable. They broke through the world's most robust air defense system. These Ukrainian shadows snuck 625 kilometers into Russian territory, flying so low they could kiss electricity lines. Their goal was a facility that had not yet been formally established. They were not visible. Then, in 1449, everything was different. Before his instruments verified it, a Russian pilot sensed it. There was something out there. The physics of contemporary warfare were completely altered by what transpired afterward, and it all boiled down to a straightforward propeller trick. The radar on the Su-35 was cutting edge. A fighter plane 150 kilometers away may be seen with 20 cows of pure devoted power. However, these weren't fighting aircraft. They were ghosts. Each person's signature is 50 times smaller than what the radar was intended to detect. 10 contacts are intermittently present. The pilot then noticed an oddity. The speed of the propellers is 7,400 RPM. In the radar return, they produced a heartbeat, a unique pulse that screamed drone louder than any image could. The weapon release was located by the pilot's thumb 18 kilometers. In 13 seconds, the rockets would close the distance. But when you know what's about to happen, 13 seconds seems like a lifetime. They were aware of the drones as well. They took an action that wasn't supposed to work. Their engines were turned off. 10 solid contacts vanished in an instant. The missiles had previously been used. They were now looking for ghosts. This is the physics that kept them alive. Every radar pulse bounces off the ground at a height of 50 meters, producing a mirror image. One actual target and one phantom are seen by the missile. The computer has 0.3 seconds to make a decision, although it makes use of signal strength. The ghosts frequently seem stronger due to ground reflection. The missile makes a poor decision. An enemy field was struck by the first missile. The pilot saw his million-dollar weapon produce an empty crater. However, one drone had betrayed its friends. Drone 3 reached a height of 500 meters. Engines operating at maximum capacity. A purposeful offering. One hit was exchanged for 8 escapes due to the flames. Heroes are more than just people. It takes 3 seconds for engines to restart. 1.2. 9 shadows leveled off at 45 meters, and the unique wine reappeared. They were dispersed over a 12-kilometer front. The pilot was defeated by the math. Fuel for one more pass, 9 targets, and a distance of 12 kilometers. It took him 3 minutes to re-engage. By then, they would be 15 kilometers away. As they vanished into the debris of the Earth, his jaw tightened. His wingman was being vectored to intercept behind him. But the drones had bought themselves time by sacrificing altitude. With engines humming against the sky, 9 shadows pushed eastward. To get past the first stratum, they exchanged one partner and for 100 meters of height. However, they would encounter an unbeatable opponent in just 73 minutes. However, they were unaware of that at the time. The 9 survivors arrived in perfect formation at Branson's Oblast in 1538, maintaining to 190 kilometers per hour through the rural flatlands at a distance of 500 meters and an altitude of 75 meters. This terrain was a nightmare for navigators. There are several identical fields with no distinguishing characteristics, making them ideal for getting lost. The Russians had placed their most advanced electronic warfare equipment along this corridor. For just this reason, the initial indication of concern was faint. 12 satellites were locked, and all signals were strong, according to the lead drone's GPS receiver, followed by 11, 7, and finally nothing. There is an instantaneous electrical blackout rather than a slow decline like flying out of range. The trap had been set by the Russians. These 4 MTLB armored vehicles are equipped with a system known as a Borisogl 2, which is organized in a precise diamond pattern. The drones were being severely impacted by the 100 Ws of perfectly calibrated interference that each one was blasting throughout the electromagnetic spectrum. Take a look at the stats to see what's happening. 8 drones were perfectly disciplined. There are no active sensors or communications. They were using only inertial navigation while in flight. Mechanical gyroscopes are now rotating freely and collecting an accuracy at a rate of 10 per hour. That equated to 300 meters of drift after 3 hours of flight. They might overlook the full facilities in Penza. This mission was destined to fail. Something needs to change right now. The numbers were being processed by the lead drone's processor. The likelihood of mission success is declining. A board threshold is getting closer. It performed a calculation that would save the mission, but costed its life. It broke radio silence around 1541. The duration of the communication was in Western Russia. It was manifesting itself in every way. 8 more people would be saved by an electromagnetic sacrifice. The missiles found nothing but the ghost of a signal that had already shifted when they arrived at empty air. Their proximity fuses. The 180-kilogram warheads exploded one after the other. Empty pastures were littered with shrapnel. In the meantime, the last navigation update had been sent to 8 drones. INS mistakes had been fixed. Position verified. While their leader flew north, incessantly communicating and drawing every missile in the oblast, they pressed east in perfect radio quiet. The Moskva 1 operators were frustrated as they stared at their screens. One bright target, shining like a beacon, was heading north. However, they were aware that there had been more. The electromagnetic quiet coming from the east was too intentional to flawless. The lead drone was discovered by 6 additional missiles behind it, followed by 4, then 12. With the decoy, the Russians were not taking any chances. In a flash of static, the operator saw the signal go. Another Ukrainian drone was destroyed. But something didn't feel quite right. At 45 meters, 8 shadows continued eastward. Thanks to 2 seconds of sacrifice, their navigation is accurate once more. As they glided through the electrical blackness, they believed they were no longer visible. They were unaware that they had been being followed for the past 6 minutes by an entirely other detection device 12 kilometers distant, one that was completely independent of radio waves. The 8 survivors arrived in Penza Oblast like ghosts at 16 o'clock, 30 meters above sea level. Engines scarcely consumed gasoline as they throttled back to the lowest sustainable RPM. They vanquished combatants. They had made it through jamming. They were no longer apparent. There are only mechanical murmurs and neither radio signals nor radar emissions. The first missile launch was alarming because of this. Without any warning, radar lock, targeting laser, or anything else, the 9M38 burst out of a woodland clearing. Just the terrifying realization that the Russians somehow, unbelievably, knew exactly where they were and the abrupt sound of rocket motors. The system, known as a 1B75 penicillin acoustic reconnaissance system, has been listening for the past 12 minutes. It was intended to use the sound of enemy artillery to locate them. Penicillin is an entirely distinct method of detection, a precise geometric arrangement of 8 microphones. They are all sensitive enough to detect a drone at 12 kilometers or a helicopter at 7. However, it goes beyond simply listening. It's computation. The speed of sound is 343 meters per second. That is the secret to everything. Each microphone records a slightly different arrival time when the final line from a drone's engine reaches the array. It is first detected by the sensor on the left, followed by the following one 0.03 seconds later, then 0.02 seconds later. The same triangulation math that submarines use to track ships is applied to those time disparities by the computer. 16,000 samples per second, creating a 3-dimensional map of each zone's sound sources. However, this is what rendered penicillin deadly to these particular drones. Similar to DNA, every engine has an acoustic imprint, a fundamental frequency, and harmonics. These Ukrainian drones' Chinese engines operate at precisely 7,400 RPM. Drones that had been seized had been used to train the system. It was more familiar with that signature than the operators were with their own heartbeats. Transferring it to a firing unit was the only thing left to do. The commander of the Tor M2 battery had an option. Either trust the sound data and fire blind, or launch with radar guidance to expose his position. He went with choice number 2. A minute later, the first missile emerged from the launcher, reaching Mach to 0.5 in 3 seconds while using only the coordinates that penicillin had given. It soared in total electromagnetic quiet for 13 seconds. Nothing was visible on the drone's radar warning receivers. The sound, the characteristic rocket scream becoming louder, was the first warning. The missile's radar then abruptly became active at a distance of 2 kilometers from the anticipated intercept spot. They only received a 2-second warning. 2 seconds at 290 kmph equate to 160 meters of travel. Reflexes took over for the primary drone pilot, climbed to maximum performance. The airframe is being pulled by 3 Gs. They flexed their wings, composite material moaning. They would break like twigs if it were any harsher. At 47 meters, the proximity fuse went off. Helicopters were intended to be destroyed by the weapon. 3,500 cubes of tungsten were released in a carefully planned sequence. Every piece moved at a speed of 21 meters per second. In a third of a second, the lead drone changed into aluminum confetti, but the others were spared. 5 seconds after it was launched, the second missile discovered that its targets were dispersing. The drones were now making haphazard throttle adjustments, 50% power, followed by 100%, 70%, and 40%. Penicillin's firing solution was wrecked by the continuously shifting engine nodes. For the system to continue attacking, a steady sound was required. Every calculation was being ruined by the Doppler shifts. 7 exact tracks turned into 7 empty spaces as the operator frustratedly viewed his screen. The third missile activated prematurely due to a bug in the software. Radar was activated at 4 kilometers rather than 2 kilometers due to a signal flip bit in memory. The additional 2 seconds of notice were the difference between survival and failure. Accepting the ridiculous danger of colliding with electricity lines that crisscrossed the fields, 3 drones dove to a height of 5 meters over open countryside. They skimmed across irrigation ditches and wheat stubble. The missile was unable to follow its prop wash since it was so low that it picked up dust clouds. 10 meters was the minimum engagement altitude. Furthermore, its proximity fuse was unable to discern between the drones and the ground reflection at that height difference. Above them, it detonated innocuously. A target was reached by the 4th missile. Following a direct hit from the throttle chaos, Drone 7 was trailing behind. At full pace, 6 survivors pushed east. Stealth was useless now. The Russians were fully aware of their location. Their sole line of defense was speed. The objective was 80 meters closer every second. It was easy math. There are 47 kilometers left, 290 miles per hour. Impact time is 9.7 minutes. Penza was already receiving their trajectory from the penicillin operator. 6 drones carrying 247 will arrive in 9 minutes at a speed of 290 miles per hour and an altitude of less than 50 meters. The defenders of the facility had just enough time to get something unique ready. That would make the drone's own sensors work against them. 6 Ukrainian drones approached JSC radio from the southwest at 16:15. In ideal afternoon clarity, the facility stretched out in front of them. There are 40 hectares of industrial buildings, crowded parking spaces, and even individual windows that reflect sunshine. Production was at its peak during the day shift. The Polana D for M1 command systems, which manage Russia's whole Western air defense network, were manufactured by 300 personnel. Then everything went crazy at precisely 800 meters from the perimeter. Guns or rockets were not the facility's final line of defense. It was a GPS spoofing scheme called Pole 21, initially intended to safeguard their nuclear facilities. Each of the 4 transmitters positioned across the complex is producing 500 watts of fictitious GPS signals. However, there was more than just jamming that prevented transmissions. It was much darker, perfect GPS. Data was being transmitted by the system, but in the incorrect direction. The drones were actually heading east rather than north, 500 meters higher. and 3 kilometers south, according to every satellite feed. The navigation computers were unable to distinguish between the two. Compared to the actual signals from space, the spoof signals were more accurate, stronger, and cleaner. The anomaly was quickly identified by the lead drone CPU. The facility was clearly visible thanks to visual sensors. GPS indicated an occupied farmland. The magnetic compass agreed with inertial navigation's continue straight, but the GPS suggested that they make a 90-degree right turn, rise 500 meters, and take off from the destination. A processing paradox resulted from this. The flight control system was built with GPS as its primary source of trust. It was the most dependable and precise guidance source. However, the GPS was suddenly yelling conflicting instructions. Make a right turn. No. Departed. Go up. Go down. In an attempt to reconcile impossible facts, the autopilot started to oscillate. Even worse, there was inconsistent spoofing. Every 3 seconds, the signal changed, displaying the drones in various fictitious locations. They were above Penza airport in a single motion. The next was flying above the Sur River and, for some reason, within an imaginary mountain. The navigation processor started making haphazard course changes, while attempting to determine a path between quickly shifting bogus places. As competing commands battled for control, the drone's wings rocked left and right, as you can see below, while the visual sensor indicated a 30 bank. The artificial horizon displayed level flight. GPS reported 545 meters, while the radar altimeter only recorded 45. Every instrument was at odds with every other instrument. After 5 seconds of this mayhem, the drone would either disintegrate or crash into the ground. Behind, the other drones were falling into the same trap, as each processor attempted to solve unsolvable navigation equations. Their flight paths started to drastically diverge. The drone had no other option. Have faith in the plan, stay on course, keep your altitude, fly, and have hope. Over Building 3, the drone eventually made the necessary corrections. Just good fortune. It may have appeared anywhere with 200 meters of wind drift. However, its optical camera is fixed upon the Pollyanna D for M1 assembly building's unique roof. The figures were run by the processor, 97 meters per second impact velocity, and a 47 descent angle. The precise 40 millimeters of steel would be penetrated by the formed charge. However, the point where the concrete walls and steel roof met was a critical weakness. Impact at 1620. More significantly, the explosion destroyed 3 chemical storage tanks in addition to tearing through the manufacturing floor, acetone for cleaning, hydrogen peroxide for etching, and trichloroethylene for degassing. The building caught fire as a result of the mixtures. Fuel-air explosion, which moved at 1,800 meters per second. The explosion was visible to the second drone, which saw a pillar of smoke rising from below. Fire was a target. It changed direction and dove in the direction of the flames. 20 seconds later, Building 7 was directly hit, targeting the hot blue. The third, fourth, and fifth drones all arrived at the same time from separate vectors. Every computer within 500 meters was brought down by an electromagnetic pulse created when one struck a transformer station. 6 months' worth of stored lithium batteries caught fire when the other to hit the component warehouse at 1623. The sixth and last drone arrived late. The building was already engulfed in 12,200-degree flames. After making one full circuit while capturing the devastation with its camera, it plunged into the only structure that wasn't on fire. There was no longer a Pollyanna D for M1 production line. Without it, Rush's S300 and S400 batteries would have to function on their own, which would have tripled their reaction times. This meant that operations like this one would be even more successful. For more amazing tales and little-known historical incidents, please subscribe to my channel, WW to Revealed, if you like this video.